Thanks for tuning in to Murder News, the true crime cult for the latest breaking news, murdery memes, TV reviews, podcast recommendations, and all things spooky. There's never been a better time to escape the pressure of pandemic life by joining our true crime cult, where we can all bunker down together, watch true crime documentaries, pet some baby goats, and scream into the void. I'm television's Aurora Katie.
Hey, it's me, your online murder friend, Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends to join the commune at murdermurder.news. This is the Week in True Crime. On Monday afternoon, murder suspect Luis Armando Sarabia escaped from Monterey County Jail in Salinas, California. He was working outside with a group of about 15 inmates on the roof of an old prison building when some of the other inmates began distracting the lone guard responsible for the group. Luis wriggled out of his uniform and worked his way through the fence at the edge of the roof around 3 p.m., guards believe. When it was time for the group to return to their cells, inmates were again able to distract the guards regarding Luis's disappearance, telling them that he was with family members in the visiting area. About 3 hours after his initial escape, around 6 p.m., county jail authorities realized something was amiss and checked the surveillance tapes, which show Sarabia making a hasty escape in only his boxer shorts. He jumped from the roof to a shorter building and then finally dropped 15 to 20 feet to the ground. When they realized he was gone, officials decided not to alert the residents in neighboring communities, but instead took to the Facebook page of the Sheriff's Department to post an update about the escapee. Amazingly, while I was in the midst of writing this story, in the early hours of Wednesday morning, around 2 a.m., Luis Sarabia turned himself in to the King City Police Department. For Luis, now things can get back on track with his case. He was originally apprehended in January 2019, along with 4 others with ties to the Sureño gang. The 5 were arrested in connection with the murder of Charles Adolfo Jose, a 19-year-old who was gunned down while washing his car in Greenfield. Luis is still awaiting trial. For Monterey County Jail, it's time for a review to their security measures. This isn't the first time that an inmate has escaped. Just over a year ago, 21-year-old Santos Finesca and 20-year-old Jonathan Salazar used a hard plastic cleaning brush to break through the bathroom ceiling and out of the jail. The 2 were both in custody for unrelated murders and successfully escaped to Mexico, but were arrested at the border just days later when they tried to re-enter the United States for some reason. When finally processed, the pair had escape charges tacked onto their existing murder charges. And of course, Luis Sarabia will face escape charges as well. In reaction to the 2019 event, Captain Thornburg said 3 additional security measures had been put into place and added, "We will take every precaution possible to make sure that we do not have another escape." Now, County Supervisor Luis Alejo explains that there are some gaps in the jail's security protocol. This latest inmate escape has really shown that we need a thorough review of our safety protocols and plans of our county jail, he said. We also need to implement an alert system to give notice to Salinas residents when there is an escapee on the loose. These are problems where there is technology readily available to address them. Alejo explained that he has submitted a proposal to the county to review the jail's exterior perimeter safety measures, implement a public alert system, and establish policies to provide timely information to the Board of Supervisors. He also plans to put in a request with the Monterey County Civil Grand Jury that they investigate and report on the jail security.
On Monday night, a 14-year-old girl beat all of the odds when she survived after she was raped and left for dead in the Betul district of Madhya Pradesh, India. Now, it's really rare that we get to tell survival stories because we try to report on current true crime cases, but honestly, nothing makes me more emotional than survivor stories because though they're super traumatic, the true crime community knows how much worse things could have been, and at least the bad guy didn't win this time. Police have not released the name of the 14-year-old as the Supreme Court of India protects the identities of sexual assault victims, but here's what we know. The girl, and I do say girl, because the thing to remember is she's only 14, which does make her a child. She was outside alone in her village where she lived on a farm. Sometime around 5 p.m., she went out in the family field to turn off a water pump. When she hadn't returned hours later, her family began to worry that something was wrong. They began searching for her and found what they believed to be her footprints in the mud. At this point, it was after dark. Her family is on a farm, literally searching the property with torchlights trying to find her and more footprints that might lead them to wherever she had gone. The search led them to a ravine where they heard whimpering down below. Her family then discovered that she'd been left for dead and buried under some rocks and thorny bushes. She was found semi-conscious but clearly very injured and was taken to a nearby hospital and is fortunately in stable condition at this time. She was able to identify her attacker as 36-year-old Sushil Verma, a family friend and neighbor. According to her family, Sushil often spent time at their home, and she even called him uncle. Sushil raped and bludgeoned her and attempted to bury her, thinking she was dead. Sushil has been arrested and charged with her rape and attack. For those of you that may or may not be following the rape crisis in India, it hit the mainstream media in 2012 after the brutal gang rape and murder of Jyoti Singh on a bus in New Delhi. According to Wikipedia, over 32,000 rapes were reported in India in 2019, which averages to about 88 cases a day. And those are just the cases that are reported. A really great source to learn more about the rape crisis in India is the podcast Khooni True Crimes of India. We were lucky enough to have host Sneha and Aditi on our show in December, and I'm linking to a few episodes of their show to dig deeper into some of the recent rapes and murders in our details down below. My sources for this case were the Times of India and the Hinduism Times, and I've also included those links down in the details below.
This week, we're watching what every other true crime enthusiast is watching. Night Stalker: The Hunt for a Serial Killer on Netflix. Night Stalker interviews survivors, families of victims, and detectives who work to solve the many crimes of Richard Ramirez from his Los Angeles spree that took place between 1984 and 1985. Ramirez was dubbed the Night Stalker by the media, and his crimes ranged from burglary, kidnapping, rape, and pedophilia to murder. The documentary takes a deep dive into all of his crimes and how he perplexed the police by not following what was believed to be a traditional serial killer path, by not having an MO. His crimes were so varied, with victims ranging from the ages of 6 to 84. Everyone seems to have an opinion on this documentary, so we want to hear yours in the comments below.
We are so excited to have Sarah and Caitlin with us from this week's favorite podcast and one of our all-time favorites, Luminol. Luminol deep dives into true crime cases, missing persons, conspiracies, and more, prioritizing cases you probably never heard of. Caitlin and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you both doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited.
Yeah, super happy to be here. It's nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
So you two have such great chemistry. I really love duos on podcasts that really get along well. And it's so obvious that you two love and respect each other so much, which is so great. How did the two of you meet and what inspired you to start a podcast together?
I'll answer the first part of how we met. Maybe Caitlin can get into the making the podcast part. But we actually met in a true crime Facebook group at an event for true crime people who like true crime in the Phoenix area in Arizona. We didn't know each other before, and it was really weird when we were sitting at this table. This was pre-COVID times, by the way. We're sitting at this table, and I looked at Caitlin and I was like, we definitely met before. And she was like, I don't think so. And I was like, I'm pretty sure. And I was like trying to figure out where we'd met, and no, I don't think we had met. I still think maybe we met. Maybe it was another lifetime. I don't know. But anyways, and then we just became friends immediately. It was really crazy.
Yeah, what she leaves out though is she stared at me for a long time and I was like, what the hell is happening?
Who is this girl and why is she staring?
We've since decided that Sarah was probably my mom in another life.
That's amazing.
Like
that
she said,
adorable.
we became close pretty quickly and we have very similar senses of humor. So we would just be sitting around talking true crime and talking all this stuff, and we'd make a joke and laugh. And we started joking like, that's podcast gold. We should start a podcast. And then one day we were like, let's have brunch and talk about if we had a podcast. And I think we both thought the other would back out, but neither did. So it was literally like, we just did it. And our first episode we recorded was amazing and so terrible at the same time. The sound was awful. Sarah was like, we were like eating snacks, so you could hear all this chipping. We've come a long way since then, but yeah, we just kind of went for it over brunch one day.
Love that. The eating thing is so funny because I feel like that's something I would do. Like Angelina, I can't imagine because you're a thoughtful person or whatever. And I'm just like, potato chips, like all the time. I could see us doing that.
I could see drinking and like spilling my drink on myself. And then that could happen.
The funniest thing is we didn't even think it would be bad. Like I think Sarah actually made a bunch of like pizza rolls and she was like, I made these to eat while we record. Like it was an intentional thing. And then we listened and we were like, that was a bad idea. Why did we do that?
Oops. That's amazing.
Without the microphone, it could be chill. You're just like hanging out eating snacks. But yeah. So what is your true crime origin? Like, was there a murder in either of your hometowns or a story that has always haunted you? What got you into true crime in the first place?
So mine is a personal story and then also a story of my family being really poor. So I grew up in a very poor rural community in rural Oregon. And so we didn't have any television channels or like internet or things like that. And so we had one channel and that was the one that like 48 hours and 60 minutes and stuff was on. So as a little kid, I would just watch that one channel and it's a lot of crime shows. Yeah. So that was one thing. And then the other thing for me is I have a murder that took place in my family. A couple generations back, my great grandfather survived a matricide where his mom killed all the children, but he survived and she also died. So it's this terrible story in my family that I've known about my whole life. And it's kind of like we've talked about this for years and everyone knows about this. And I would share that story with people and they would just be like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, yes, of course that's oh my gosh and upsetting. But it was like something that was so part of my family's culture, I guess, that I've always felt this connection with like not understanding people who commit violent crimes. So like understanding what families go through and different things like that and how it's talked about. So it's always been a part of my upbringing.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Mine started at like way too young of an age. My parents never censored anything. So like if they were watching America's Most Wanted, we were watching America's Most Wanted. And I just like was hooked from a young age. JonBenet was definitely the case. I mean, I was like in elementary school, but I remember like being glued to the TV. And then I remember like, and I would go on these weird, like, you know, once we got computers and stuff, I would like Google serial killers and go down these weird rabbit holes. And I remember being like, I'm like 10, should I be doing this? But then when I grew up, I was like, other people do this too? Like, it took me a while to, I just thought I was this creepy kid who was like into true crime, but now I realize there's more people. But yeah, JonBenet is definitely the case that I watched all the time. And that was like my first really deep dive into true crime.
You know, and I think that's been one of the interesting things about joining the true crime community for me is I think a lot of us had an early start and liked it as kids. And I always thought I was so morbid and such a, like an outsider for being so into this. So, and into it is a strong word, like interested, intrigued, you know, like kind of like haunting my dreams and whatever. And I really like my family wasn't necessarily into it. I found out a little later that my mom was in a way I didn't anticipate, but my sisters have no interest. And so I thought it was like just me and that I couldn't share it with anybody. And I would watch documentaries and horror or on like serial killers. And it's like, I can tell no one, like nobody's going to care about this. So it was so nice finding this amazing community where we all can like talk about these concerns we have.
I definitely had the same, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I definitely had the same experience just being a child and being like, oh, I'm the weirdo here. Like my family thought so as well. Like nobody was into it that I knew until I was like, you know, at least a late teenager. But
and then you found us.
Well, it's hard to explain to people who aren't, and like you're like, well, into it, but not, it's hard to explain. You either get it or you don't, because we're not into murder. Like I'm not, it's like it's almost like, studying the brain and like how
Yes.
brains work differently and stuff. But if people aren't into true crime, we just look crazy. It's hard to explain.
Right.
Well, there is definitely that chunk of the population of true crime fans that go too far. Like that's 100% not all of us, but it's there is some of them that make that impression on people for sure. But
yeah.
Right. Well, you've had some really amazing episodes. Some of my favorites were the recent episode you had on the election, where you discussed some political crimes and the curse of Tippecanoe. I've also really enjoyed your episode you had recently on cases involving Satan, because I've been super into the chilling adventures of Sabrina and like Satanism, which I think that show doesn't exactly explain how that all works. But it's like, I really loved your episode on that. I thought that was really fascinating. And out of all of the cases you've researched, which ones have really stuck with you the most?
Oh man, that's a hard question. It's funny, I was a little worried because we have this joke, Caitlin and I do, that like once we record an episode, it's like we kind of forget what we've talked about. And so for a minute I was like, oh no, I'm not going to remember what she brought.
I remember no cases ever.
None ever. I'm always really haunted by missing persons who are never found and who we really don't have clear ideas about what happened to them. Emma Phillipov is a case that will always haunt me in Canada. She went missing in Victoria, British Columbia. And that one, for some reason, I just can't get out of my head. Well, not this year, but typically I go to Victoria once a year because my husband's a professional athlete and he has a race there in the summer. And I always like stand there at the Empress and I'm like, oh, this is so weird. Where did she go? Another one is, I always mispronounce his last name, but Lars Matank in Europe. He again went missing. Caitlin covered that case. Kind of, where'd he go? He just disappeared. So those kinds of cases are definitely the ones that stick with me a lot.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I would also say we've covered a lot of cases of women being killed or abused. We did an episode on Turkey, and I talked about femicide in Turkey and the government doing nothing. I recently covered rape culture in Alaska. Just Junko Furuto is one. Just violence against women and how in some places no one cares. That haunts me. I wrote one. We haven't recorded it yet. It's obviously not out yet, but I just wrote a case last night and it's gonna haunt me forever. It's just another case, and this is a woman of color, and so people cared even less, and those cases just break my heart and haunt me.
In June, you hosted a Luminol ball over Zoom, which benefited the National Domestic Violence Hotline and featured guests like Billy Jensen. How did you come up with the idea for the ball, and why did the Domestic Violence Hotline feel like such a good fit?
Great question. The idea for the ball came sort of out of nowhere, but it was actually a response to a quarantine. Like, how can we host an event that a lot of people would enjoy attending, that people would want to go to, that people felt like they got something out of it or that they did good? And so we thought, Luminol Ball, one, the name sounds really fun and I want to go to a Luminol Ball. Like, that just sounds like a good time. But the other thing is it was a charity event, so people could buy raffle tickets. I also thought it was we thought, but I did this part of the work for this, but we thought it'd be a great idea to have different true crime makers, people who are in the community, who are crafty, who create things, to donate items, and then we would raffle those off. So it was just a coming together that felt so special during a time where people were at home and stuck. And Billy Jensen was so nice to want to come and hang out with us. And it kind of surprised everybody. So we didn't tell anyone because we wanted it to be a surprise. So it was just a lot of fun. And I think COVID and just wanting to have a moment of getting together was perfect. And then Caitlin, I don't know if you want to talk about the National Domestic Violence Hotline and kind of why we went with them.
Yeah, we actually chose them really because of quarantine and COVID too, in doing so many cases of violence against women. And, we were seeing all these articles come up and things come up in our research and all these statistics about how many abuse victims were stuck at home with abusers. And that just led us to the Domestic Violence Hotline and wanting to give them money, and looking at their website when we decided to donate, that's exactly what the front page of their website says is due to COVID, people are just stuck at home with their abusers. So it was like an easy decision to donate to them.
Yeah, that's a great choice. Very perfect timing.
Yeah. Well, ladies, it's been truly such a pleasure having both of you finally at our show. We get to meet. This is so great. Can you let our viewers know where they can find you on social media?
Yes, absolutely. Our name pretty much everywhere is Luminol Pod. So if you look up Luminol Pod, you're going to find us on Instagram at Luminol Pod, Twitter, Luminol Pod, luminolpod.com. Facebook, you can look up Luminol Podcast. Those are the places that we kind of hang out the most. Instagram is probably the most.
Awesome.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks so much for coming. And everyone be sure to subscribe to Luminol wherever you listen to podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.
This week on murder.news, our writer Elena Holman blessed us with the gift of our first ever Murder Libs. The endlessly entertaining word game where your friend prompts you to fill words into a blank before reading the story you've created aloud for the ultimate giggle party on a long car ride or at recess. Well, Elena created a true crime version about a best-selling true crime novelist. Check out our Murder Libs on murder.news or the details down below and send us your stories. We want to read them aloud and giggle along with you.
And for those of you who want a little intro of what Murder Libs consists of, you can check out our first try on our podcast. Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
Help support Murder News by signing up for our commune at murder.news, and your $5 a month sponsorship helps us keep the true crime lights on. Helps us produce our weekly show and help support our amazing writers that keep you up to date with the latest breaking news every day on murder.news. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you next week.